Alright, Freshman Multimedia, this is the first tutorial for the CSS, Intermediate CSS, Part 2. And we're going to do the first two challenges here, so we're going to watch two videos and do the two challenges. Challenge 1, group the groupers. Challenge 2, the overflowing ocean. So here we go with the first introductory video from our friend Pamela.
So far, we've seen how you can use CSS to style your text, but we can also use CSS to completely change the layout of our page. That means we can move things around, change their size, even put them on top of each other. What are the things we want to move around? Sometimes there are elements that we've already made, like a certain paragraph or a certain heading, but oftentimes there are a group of elements that we've made, like a selection of text or a heading and a few paragraphs. In order to move them around together as a unit, we need to introduce two new HTML tags, which we call the grouping elements. We didn't talk about them before CSS because they're only useful when combined with CSS. They have no semantic meaning to the browser. The first tag is the span tag, and it's what we use for grouping a selection of text. Let's say we want to color this word love red, and we just want to color the word, not the rest of the heading. We'll put our cursor before love, type the start tag for span, hit after, type the end tag. Okay, now we want to style this span of characters. We could make a rule to color all spans on the page, but we may not want them all to be red. Let's give the span a class of lovey-dovey and add a rule just for elements that have the class lovey-dovey. So dot lovey-dovey, color red. Look how lovey-dovey that text is now. So spans are good for grouping selections of text. How do we group a bunch of elements together? That's where the div. Let's say we want to group this bottom section, the official info header and the paragraphs and picture below it. To do that, I'll put my cursor before the H3 and do the start tag for div, and then go down to the final paragraph and write the end tag for div. We have a div, now we need to style it. To style the div, I'm going to give it an ID, official info, and then add a rule for it up here. So official info and background, and let's make it a nice gray. That's good. So now you can see the div has become a gray box containing all of the elements inside of it. And it's different from if we'd given each of them a gray background separately. If we did that, there'd be a space in between them that wouldn't go gray. We have to make a div if we want to box around everything. You can think of span for grouping text, and you can think of div for grouping elements, but there's another way to distinguish them as well. You see, there are two types of elements in the CSS world, inline and block. An inline element does not have a new line after it. Like if you make multiple of them, they'll all be on the same line. A few examples we've talked about are A and image. And you can see with this image how it just runs into the text next to it. There's no new line after it. A block element does have a new line after it. And that is what most HTML tags are. The headings, the paragraphs, the lists. The browser put new lines after all of them without you needing to write a BR. Span and div? Well, a span creates an inline element, and a div creates a block element. That means that if you add a div and you don't add any other style, like that bit of text I just wrapped in a div, now has new lines before and after. And maybe that's what you want. Just keep this difference in mind. And keep going, because there's a lot more we can do with these tags, especially with the mighty div.
Okay, so for this first challenge, we're doing the groupings that we just learned with the span and the div. And in our directions here, tells us that The web page describes groupers, a type of large ocean fish, and the first step, your job is to make the first sentences of each paragraph stand out. So start by adding span tags around each first sentence, and then give both of your span tags a class called first sentence. So here's what the span will look like. So we can do that. So I'll copy that. I'm going to go over here, and my first sentence and my first paragraph is here. So I'm going to paste. So I've got span, and then I've made a class for first sentence so that we can reference it. And then with most tags, we have to have a close tag. So at the very end of the sentence, where the period is, I put your the closed span tag. So now it's telling me, cool, you did the first one, so now you need to do it for the first sentence of the second paragraph. So I'm going to the second paragraph. I click in here. I can still do paste. And then I'm going to go to the end of this sentence, which is right here, and do my close tag. So /span and close tag. And our guy is a happy camper, and we can go to the next step. Okay, so our directions say that they want them either bold or underlined. So going back to our CSS styling from previous lessons, we need to do font weight. Instead of color or background color, we're doing a font weight from our fonts lesson, and we're going to do bold. And what happened here was that our first sentence in the first paragraph and the second paragraph turned bold. So let's go to the next step. Now it says wrap the paragraphs in a single div, and then give the div a class of info.